Hello, everyone. Welcome to Magic in Media, the podcast brought to you by the Vibe Collective and me, Carly D, a reader and manager here at the Vibe Collective. This podcast blends magic with the current pop culture news and moments to show you that magic is all around us every day. We just have to look around and find it. So we find the metaphysical and magic in the world all around us and share it with you. This is Magic in Media. So welcome. We've got some fun topics this week and a lot going on energetically, astrologically. We are feeling the intense energy around us, and that makes sense with the Leo full moon that we have coming up this weekend, which is our first topic of the day. So this Saturday, we have a Leo full moon, and Leo is a fire sign. So there is an intensity that comes with Leo. Leo is also very big about appearance and going out and being seen. I do think that this will continue to affect how people are really showing up right now, like how they are showing up online, in person. We're very much paying attention to how people in media and the public are being perceived morally, ethically right now. That is very Leo, because again, Leo is all about going out and being seen, how you're being perceived. So that is very interesting that we're kind of seeing that as a collective right now. But overall, something you could do this week to connect to that Leo full moon would be to go out, spend time out, doing things you love with people you love, maybe dress up a little bit or do something to revamp your look, because Leos, again, are about being seen. So appearance is very important to them. Leos are very big on appearance. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of people revamping their look, their fashion, their style, or even just their brand, like kind of rebranding themselves and changing things up. I think we're going to see a lot of that going into this weekend and really like the next month, right? Is people changing up their appearance and kind of leaning in to change. So again, something you could do this week to connect to this full moon that we have on Saturday is to change up your look, rebrand your look or your appearance. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy, right? Like you don't need to go chop all your hair off and get a bob or, completely change your look, but maybe just incorporate some new accessories or style your hair in a way you normally wouldn't. Pull out your favorite outfit or an outfit that you usually save for special days or occasions and embrace that every day in life, in this world, is really a special day. So we can use those nice outfits that we're saving and really, have pride, like Leos are the lion, right? To have pride in our appearance and the way we're looking. So this weekend, if you're looking for a little change in energy, you kind of want to, and honestly, I think a lot of us could use a change up in energy, kind of a release from the tension and stress of the world. This weekend would be a great time to try out some different looks, try out some new hairstyles, maybe a new braid, or like just styling your hair a way you wouldn't normally, so you can have a little fresh air, a little breath of fresh air in your look and in your appearance. So really embrace the moment this weekend with that Leo full moon that's very vivacious, outgoing energy. We talked about the things you can do this week to lean into that full moon this weekend would be to go out, be seen, spend time with your friends, or change up your look a little bit. Do something a little different, pull out a new hat, a new bag. It's crazy the difference we can make with things we already have if we just kind of slow down a little bit, look at our wardrobe, look at our closet, come to it with some intention this weekend that we do get energy off of our appearance, look good, feel good, I feel is very much a real thing. So if you're feeling a little down, down, you're feeling a little tired, which I'm definitely picking up on with the collective and with our collective energy, then do that kind of appearance revamp to breathe that new life into yourself this weekend and give yourself that extra self-care that we may be really needing during this time. So that Leo full moon is coming this Saturday, the 1st. Again, Leo is very vivacious, outgoing, fiery energy. So we will be feeling that. I always talk about this on my lives too, but full moons always make me feel really tired. So even though they have this reputation for, crazy full moon, wild energy, party, they actually make me very sleepy, like the whole kind of like 2 days leading up to the full moon, which we are definitely in right now. And I just feel kind of like hazy, and you feel that full moon energy coming on. So let us know how you feel. Like, does a full moon energize you? Does it make you feel more sleepy? But that is what we are going to be going into this weekend on the 1st, Saturday, which again, we talked about going out and being seen. Saturday is very much a day to do that. So very fitting, kind of cute that our Leo full moon lines up with a weekend where people would be going out and being seen. And I do know that, the climate of the world today is crazy. We're all feeling that tension. We're all feeling that kind of collective heavy energy right now. So even though we are feeling that, we are in the thick of this intense energy, we can still embrace the moment, find pockets of joy, to lift ourselves up, lift up our community. We can't let the sadness and heaviness overtake. So this weekend, lean into that Leo-ness of even spreading joy, bringing people together. There still is room for joy in times of sadness. And I think it's very important that we lean into that. So be sure to give yourself a little extra time this weekend to remember that, and to remember to lean into ourselves and take care of ourselves a little bit more, especially, like I said, appearance wise, just kind of giving ourselves a little more attention in that Leo way. So also coming up very soon here next week on February 6th. So going into our second topic on the podcast this week is the Olympic Games. We have the Winter Olympics coming to Milan. And this is the 2026 Winter Olympics. So the Olympics, we've all heard about them, been around for a very long time. And there is a lot of magic and mysticism surrounding, we're going to lean into really the symbolism of the Olympics and the symbolism and magic that is represented in the Olympics. And a lot of these things are things we've seen for years and years. So we're definitely familiar with them. But there is overall a very mythical energy, almost, I would say, when it comes to the Olympics, with even just, we have to touch on the Greekness of it all, right? And Greek gods and power and themes and athleticism. And that is so much of where even the Olympics, it's where it stems from. So if you are someone who is into Greek mythology and the gods and goddesses, there's a lot of magic there. I will be so honest. For me, those are not archetypes that I work with a ton. I'm familiar with them, but I was raised Catholic, so I'm more of a saints girl. I do a lot of my rituals with saints and prayer candles. But like I said, if you are a Greek mythology person, there's a whole nother level of the Olympics and the magic behind them with the Greek aspect of it, and all of the mythology there. So if you're into that, check it out and kind of see where that magic lines up for you in the Olympics. But we are going to talk about some symbolism. And the first one is the Olympic flame. So this is probably the most overt mystical symbol, something that we all kind of think of when the Olympics comes up. But fire in the Greek myth represents divine presence, knowledge, and transformation. And the Olympics really is this time of divine presence. This is the best coming together, right? The best of the best to show their knowledge, their art, their wisdom of these topics, of these sports that they're in. And transformation, fire is very transformative. I can't think of one Olympian who would walk away from the Olympics not feeling that energy of fire, transformation, and power. So again, fire in the Greek mythology represents that divine presence, knowledge, and transformation. I think those are themes we definitely see across the Olympics. To me, the biggest one that really stands out is transformation. I do think a lot of, we burn it down to rebuild it. You come into the Olympics, I'm sure, as a version of yourself and leave transformed. You leave different, often probably in a positive way, but there is, I'm sure, some more knowledge picked up along their way there too. So the mythology that comes into the flame is Prometheus stole fire from the gods to give to the humans. And this was a huge mythic moment to give the humans fire, right? And the flame is lit in Greece and carried across the world to the location of the Olympics. And it really is like a sacred relay, or almost like a recreation, like a human recreation of Prometheus taking the fire from the gods and giving it to the humans. But sacred is a big word that kept coming up for me when I was doing this research for the Olympics, because it really is so sacred, right? The ritual of athleticism and sports and training is incredibly disciplined, incredibly ritualistic. And I think a big part of the message I want to send with the Vibe Collective is that all of the rituals in our life are sacred, right? Making your coffee in the morning, folding your laundry, getting up to do your run, going to the gym and lifting weights and staying on your regimen. Those are all sacred rituals that are in our everyday life. And if we approach them with that discipline and intention, then we reach this kind of next level of awareness and how it is good for us. And it really levels us up and levels up our life when we are consistent with these sacred rituals. And the Olympics, I feel, is so highlighting of this. And when we really pay attention and honor the sacred rituals of athleticism and taking care of our bodies, those people end up at the Olympics, right? So sacred and sacred rituals was a big thing that kept popping up for me as I was doing this research. So really, even starting out the Olympics, we're seeing that, again, sacred relay, that sacred run of the flame from Greece to this new point of the world. So it's sharing that knowledge, sharing that divine presence of the power and the energy that is at the Olympics, and carrying that flame. It just shows that we have to share it, right? We have to travel around the world to share this divine knowledge, this transformational power. And it does feel very sacred. It taps into these deep archetypes inside of us when we think of the Olympics and we think of the type of people, the Olympians, and being strong that go there, right? There is definitely a sacred energy around everything. And another way we can kind of look at the flame is this ritual of continuity and blessing. The person carrying the flame is blessing everyone with, the start of the games, things going. It is very ritualistic, very spiritual in that way of, again, blessing the beginning. But that ritual of continuity of that, this is, I don't have what number of the Olympics it is. It's like slipping my mind, but this continuous, of this ritual, of this thing that we do. The Olympics is very omnipresent in world culture, in global culture. And this flame, this eternal flame, is just another ritual of that continuity, right? Of the continuous, of something that carries a lot of tradition, and we keep moving it forward because it is sacred and it matters to us. So lots of symbolism, lots of magic around the Olympics, just in the flame. And that's just the first kind of thing that we're thinking of, and it is really how we start the games, right? So that is our first really symbolism of the Olympics. Now, another reason it feels very sacred to us, and a lot of people, I would even say, like, I get emotional watching the Olympics, like watching people pursue this like greatness and the sport that is really, they've devoted their life and their body and their whole mission and purpose to. It is very emotional. So it does, there's a deepness that we tap into even just as people watching it. So something that, other things that make it feel sacred that really are, I would say, more spiritual elements of the Olympics are the fact of that it taps into the hero's journey. So a lot of the time in tarot, I think of the fool's journey in tarot. The Fool is the first card of the tarot, but he goes through this whole journey, and there's good things and there's bad things and there's challenges and there's rewards. But ultimately, the Fool gets to the end of the journey, the world in tarot. And it is this element of completion when we get to the world. But I always say eventually we are tumbled back into the Fool again, right? The hero's journey plays on a lot of that for me in terms of magic too. We know the hero's journey. It's a very traditional kind of storyline of, place of origin, challenge, acceptance, coming home. There's lots of that kind of classic story of the hero's journey connected to the Olympics, right? They start at home, training, learning. They go somewhere to show their skills. They eventually come back home. That is all the hero's journey. There is also a lot of sacrifice of the body, right? Sacrifice of time and energy that they would be spending maybe doing other things or with loved ones and family. So there is this huge element of sacrifice, which is very sacred and very spiritual, that we're not only sacrificing our body, but our time and energy by training in this sport that is so important to them. And there is another aspect that I think is very poignant right now, that when we are participating in the Olympics, no matter where we come from in the world, there is this element of a global truce. And even this kind of it being like peace, right? We all are kind of setting aside our differences, no matter where we are in the world, to have like a fair competition over these things. So that can feel very heavy for a lot of us right now, that idea of a global truce. And maybe it is a fantasy. Maybe it is something that we can access during the Olympics. And there is this positiveness, I feel, with that element right now, and something that we do need to acknowledge and pay attention to. And that, again, is that idea of a global truce, of us kind of setting down our differences to come together for this common thing. And another thing that we pay attention to the Olympics is this transcendence through excellence. Again, when you get emotional watching a figure skater do their performance, it is because this is that transcendence through excellence. It is someone who has just taken their craft and devoted so much energy to it. We feel it, like sitting at home watching it. And that is the transcendence. That is the power, like, of the Olympics in a lot of ways, of it connecting all of us, no matter where we are, all across the world. And it is connecting us through excellence, through the idea that these sacred rituals and this discipline can ultimately amount to this. And how much respect we have for it, I think, is very important too. We respect everyone there. The athletes respect themselves and each other. And if anything, we could use a lot more respect in the world. And I think that that is something to be mindful of and prideful of with the Olympics coming, is the idea of respect and respecting each other, and how important that is, and where else we can bring that into our world. So there is a collective belief kind of magic around the Olympics that is very powerful. Like we've talked about, that kind of idea of global truce, but why it connects all of us in this like idea of collectiveness, right? Bringing us all together, trying to word today. But this collective belief of magic is brought to us because billions of people are watching this event at the same time. That is collective energy. I always feel that when you meditate alone, of course, you feel some energy, but if you've ever meditated in a group setting, you feel that energy even more. So because billions of people are watching this at the same time, we feel that collective energy. We feel the collective tension when someone falls or, doesn't succeed in the way they want to. And we feel that collective projection of hope, pride, fear, and awe, right? We're all kind of in it when we're watching. And as a collective, that brings us all together. So there is a lot of hope. There's a lot of fear. There's almost every emotion, I'm sure, in the Olympics, but we feel it as a collective when we're all watching together and we're all brought together by it. And I think what a great time to lean into that idea of, coming together as a collective and leaning into projecting things like hope and respect into the world a little bit more. But I thought that was a really cool way to kind of explain or show that when we're all doing something together in the world, we do feed this collective energy. And there is definitely that happening, that kind of like shared psychic field when we're all doing the same thing and we're all kind of brought into that same energy. So that is why the Olympic moments feel bigger than life. Comes every 4 years. And I know we have the winter and the summer, but really they do feel such like big moments, like the Olympics. Like we all know what it means. We all know the energy that comes with the idea of the Olympics. And there is reasons why it feels bigger than life. And it feels like the most, monumental thing that athletes can achieve. There is lots of reason why we feel that. There's lots of symbolism for it. So that magic around us, we are definitely going to be feeling as the Olympics start next week. So if you are watching the opening ceremony next week, you'll be thinking a little more about the flame, what it represents. And again, if anything, let's just put out there into the universe that the collective energy that comes from something that is as sacred and disciplined and comes from a place of peace like the Olympics, that energy spreads out into the world more. And as a collective, we are just spreading out more of that hope and awe and just good energy that comes from the Olympics, because I do feel it is a very positive thing. So if we're all feeling the collective energy of the Olympics right now, let's lean into the positiveness and the, hope that can be sent by it. So very excited to watch the Olympics myself. I will definitely be looking at it through a different lens this year. And I hope that this topic gave you a few more things to think about when it comes to the Olympics this year. Now, our next topic is about a tarot deck that is very near and dear to my heart. We carry it in the Vibe Shop, and it is called the Motherpeace Tarot Deck. So I have it here with me. It is a deck that I have carried in my collection for about a decade now. It is a round tarot deck, so this is what it looks like. It has a lot of lore. We're going to break down some of the lore. But just even starting there, that is one of the things that makes it very unique, is the fact that it's round. So today we are going to talk about the Motherpeace Tarot Deck and how it aligns with the fashion house Dior, because we've been talking a lot this year about fashion and magic and how they come together. And this is one of my favorite fashion and magic stories. So I wanted to break it down for all of us today. So the Motherpeace Tarot is a deck of tarot cards inspired by the goddess movement and second wave feminism. So it was created by two women, Karen Vogel and Vicky Noble, in the 70s. And another thing that's really cool out of this deck is that it has never been out of print. So ever since the 70s, you've always been able to get it. It's always been in print, which if you are a tarot deck collector, you know that some decks go in and out of print, but it just kind of shows the standing power of this deck, how influential it was, how monumental it was really at the time, that it has never been out of print. It really is a classic when it comes to tarot decks. And in 2017, It was the subject of a Christian Dior fashion collection. So they took several cards. This was one of them. They made into a sweater. This is the Five of Swords. But they took several of the cards and made them into bags, like caftans, scarves, sweaters. This one was made into a sweater, and I'm telling you, it is my dream to own a piece from the Motherpeace Dior collection. I thought it was so cool that they took such a influential and meaningful deck, especially to women, and made it into art, made it into fashion, which is a lot of what we've been talking about with Dior and fashion. Is they've always had this kind of metaphysical magic, astrology, crystal tarot connection as a fashion house. So this deck, when it was created, it really was in the feminist movement. It had a lot of depiction of women and people of color that you did not see in traditional tarot decks. Back then, tarot decks were a lot of masculine or, men focused characters and lots of white people. There was not a lot of diversity. So this was a very different deck for its time, especially when it came out in the 70s. So it is a woman empowerment deck in a lot of ways, but it did get a great deal of attention for its feminist art, and the relationships between the artist, the work, and the viewer. So connecting women in a lot of ways. And it is called the Motherpeace deck, which the name itself is very feminine, very much a connection to women. But it was very progressive. It is still very progressive, especially in feminist artwork. There is lots of nudity, depiction of childbirth in this tarot deck, which again, very much not seen in the 70s. It was, I don't want to say taboo, but it was very different. It was pushing the boundaries in a time where things were more conservative in tarot. But it is, again, iconic, very much a part of the feminist kind of revolution. So the Motherpeace was created by two women. They had studied anthropology and women's study and history. They were roommates and friends, Karen and Vicky, and they shared this common interest in the goddess, spirituality, psychic studies, and the occult. And one night in the 70s, inspiration struck, and Karen said she felt our room literally tilt. So they were roommates. The inspiration struck to make the deck, and she's like, I felt like the energy in the room shift, basically, and then they started to devise the deck based on their knowledge of history, alternative healing, and psychic studies. There is a book that is connected to this as well, The Motherpeace, A Way to the Goddess Through Myth, Art, and Tarot. I have that book as well, and it is a lot of feminine energy, woman energy. So if that is something that you are craving right now, you're wanting to lean more into with your spiritual practice, I would recommend something like the Motherpeace because it has such a feminine energy for tarot. It's probably the most female deck I can think of the traditional tarot decks, definitely of the ones that I have. So I do highly recommend it if you are leaning more into that feminine mother energy to kind of see what this deck would feel like for you. But there is a book that accompanies it. And then where we kind of come into it with how it affects our current culture. Again, in 2017, Christian Dior, the fashion house, approached the creators, Vicky and Karen, and proposed, or first they asked for permission to design clothing based on the artwork from the deck. And this was new. This was the first time they had been asked for the artwork for the deck. So they were asked for the permission to do it. I do remember when it came out, there was controversy around, the initial creation of this deck was about, women empowerment and feminism. And lots of people who were in that camp were kind of turned off by the fact that this fashion house like Dior, which pieces are thousands of dollars, kind of materialistic, if you think about it, was using this deck that had kind of such sacred history and culture with feminism and the feminist movement. But I listened to an interview with the creators, and they were like, it was time. This deck was made in the 70s. This is 2017, and it was time for us to share our art on a bigger stage. And I remember in the interview, Karen was even like, if people don't understand, like, that's fine, but ultimately it was my art and I wanted to share it on a bigger stage at this point in my life. It had been pretty much like 30 years since they had released the deck. So I think in a lot of ways, it was like breathing new life into this art. So according to Vogel, rather than being about physical death, the death card, it represents a lot of shedding skin, and it has a snake on the card as well, and symbolizes a lot of transformation and renewal. So that was one of the first cards that we really saw depicted, was the death card, which is a lot of transformation and renewal. And I think they were even saying in this interview, like, it's time for this new transformation of this deck. The time was right. And I think that makes so much sense. It was time to breathe new life into it and let it transform in a different way. And death in tarot is this card of transformation, not literal death. So I really do think they were letting their art, their deck, kind of take on new life and new transformation in that way. So yeah, the death card was highlighted in there. It was one of the first pieces and cards that was really shown. So I think that the symbolism there even is really cool, that they were letting this deck kind of, have a life of its own in a new way. So, following the release of the ethereal haute couture dresses, sales of the Motherpeace Tarot Deck doubled in a few months, as well as other tarot decks increasing. So, something I want to point out is that when this collection dropped in 2017, we saw a rise in tarot decks being purchased in general, the interest in tarot, the interest in not only the Motherpeace tarot deck, but all tarot decks. So Dior again is leaning into lots of crystals and mysticism this year with their new collection coming out. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of a surge in crystals, crystal jewelry, and crystal healing, with this becoming more popular with fashion houses again. So something very exciting to look forward to is maybe some more crystals in fashion, more crystals kind of having the resurgence, especially when it comes to accessories, and mindfully incorporating crystal jewelry and accessories, into our look. But I did think that was really cool that, when Dior released the line of Motherpeace in 2017, that the deck itself had that change, that transformation, that rise in sales of the deck and tarot in general. So I do think that the creators, Karen and Vicky, really knew it was time to breathe new life into it. And I think that even that message is really good for a lot of us, that something can be 30 years old, like the Motherpeace Tarot Deck, and it needs new life sometimes, right? We need to be open to change, open to breathing new life into something. And I think that this example of taking this beautiful deck and turning it into a Dior fashion line is just another way that we can take something, transform it, and kind of breathe new life into it. So that is the story of the Motherpeace Tarot and the Dior fashion line that came from it. So definitely check that out. You can Google images of the different pieces that they made. I know they used, I want to say the Justice card, the World, the Five of Swords, the Death card. I think there were maybe a couple more, but it's not like there's 78 cards in a tarot deck, so they did not use all of them. But it was really interesting, the ones they chose too, which we could even break that down, right? Like which cards they did choose of the 78. But because I have this beautiful deck in my hands right now and we're talking about it, I am going to pull a card for all of us as a collective for this Leo full moon we have coming this weekend, so y'all can see the Motherpeace in action on the podcast. As we have learned a little bit more about it this episode, let's use it. So let's see what the Motherpeace has to say about this Leo full moon we have coming up this weekend. And we are getting the Queen of Wands. So one thing I want to point out, wands are fire. Leo is fire. We have a Leo full moon. You can see on this card that there is a lion on it. Leo, lion, Leo full moon. How fitting. So, as a collective, with this Priestess of Wands or the Queen of Wands from the Motherpeace, I want to remind you of your own power. The Queen of Wands in the tarot is very much, I consider her like the nature witch of the tarot. So, one, go out in nature and connect to nature this weekend. Even if it's cold where you live, spend some time getting some fresh air. And we feel a certain power when we ground and connect to nature. And I think that the Queen of Wands is very much about that. But she is also very much about power, right? Wands, again, are fire. That's action. That's going after the things you want, standing your ground. So be strong, right? Lean into your strength, into what makes you you, your individuality. I feel that's very Leo, and having a lion on this card, your individuality, what makes you you, your Leo-ness, if you will, is very important this full moon. So we got the Queen of Wands as our card from the Motherpeace. Again, how fitting that we get a kind of female archetype energy from this like feminist movement deck. So definitely lean into that strong female, I'm a woman, hear me roar energy of the Leo full moon this weekend. Okay? That is your message from the Motherpeace. So thank you so much for joining us this week, for finding some magic in the media around us. We will be back next week with some fresh topics. And as always, be sure to find the magic in your own life. I will see you next week.